Okay, everybody. I see a number of people there registered who are on, who are live. Thank you very much. Looking forward to talking to you all in a minute. We're starting in just about 1 minute time. Thanks. As you register there, guys, as you come on live, do me a favor and just type in your name so I can see you popping up there. I know you're there. Thanks. Okay, everybody, we are ready to rock and roll. I see Ron is there. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, great to be with you.
I'll say hello to everybody. Hi, Ron. Can you see me there?
I see you now. Yes, great to be with you, Padraig, and with everybody else.
From sunny Atlanta?
Yeah, that's right. Well, not sunny. We're getting a good Dublin rain here this morning.
Are you? No kidding. We've got beautiful sunshine, 23 degrees.
I'm convinced that Ireland is always sunny based on my visit.
That's true. You had a wonderful week, didn't you?
I had a fantastic time and really enjoyed meeting everybody. I have a lot of great memories of that time.
Yeah, good. Thank you. It was great. Okay, we're going to kick off. We're going to get started. And welcome, everybody. It's good to have you with us. The seminar was a great success. I want to thank every one of you who are there. Really appreciate you attending and really appreciate the contribution. And while we got great feedback, some feedback on improvements we can make, and thank you for that. But in general, really positive feedback. People were very happy with the seminar, as were we. So I want to thank everybody for it. Any thoughts, any comments you want to make on the seminar very quickly before we start, Ron?
Well, first of all, I'm glad for the opportunity for us to have a chat again today. Really grateful for everything that you've done, Padraig. And I really look forward to us working together to help people grow their leadership, and as a consequence of that, see their worlds change, their businesses, their relationships, everything around them.
So let's get started. We're going to rock and roll. I'm going to go to slides for just a couple of minutes, just so that people can see a few pieces that we'll talk about. So bear with me just a sec, guys, when I get into that. Anybody who's at the seminar, or anybody who's read the blogs, was at the first webinar, will know that we talk about the 5 key core skills of leadership. And in the self-coaching guide that you got at the end of the seminar, we talked about these in quite a bit of detail and gave you action items, things to do on them. And they were personal accountability, self-management, goal achievement, interpersonal skills, and persuasion. And interestingly, they relate directly to emotional intelligence and to your own development as a human being. It's interesting when you actually look at them, the relation they have with emotional development. Coming out of that seminar, coming out of the feedback that we got from everybody on areas that they'd like us to look at, and coming out of the scores on the assessments, we ended up with this little table. And we decided that we would focus on some very specific areas today. We asked you what you'd like us to work on in this webinar, and combining that with the assessment scores, we decided that we would look at a few of them: problem solving, decision making, and futuristic thinking. Now, we already wrote blogs on these and got them out over the last couple of weeks. I hope that everybody had the opportunity to actually read them. And if you didn't, I encourage you to do so. And I see a little word next up there, like planning and organizing. In the next week, we will be doing a blog on planning and organizing. Okay, and just one last thing. So today we're going to be looking at these 3 that are highlighted there in yellow: problem solving, decision making, and futuristic thinking. And we're also going to talk very briefly about the program. Quite a number of people in the feedback forms said that they would like to have us talk a little bit more, just a little bit about the program. So we'll maybe 5 minutes at the end talking about the program. So just before we start, I would like to share something with you. You remember at the end of the seminar, we gave you a gift of leadership. And the idea that leaders pay forward is a really, really important concept. And quite a number of people came back and said the deadline is too tight, and would we extend it? So we extend the deadline for that gift of leadership to the 2nd of June. And I just want to make a point to you that not only does that gift have a street value of €500, but it has the potential to kickstart somebody's leadership journey. And I don't know what your experience has been in life, Ron, but my experience has certainly been that there's no greater satisfaction than helping somebody achieve their potential.
Well, I think actually, Padraig, there are a couple of things I'd like to comment on regarding this offer that you made. The first is thinking about the kind of impact that spirit of generosity has had on my own life as a recipient of other people who've been generous. I can look back over my life and recognize that there were situations that occurred where somebody came and gave me something, having no idea what the impact of it was going to be. They created an opportunity. They made an introduction. They invited me to attend something or to complete an assessment like this. And when I look back on it, it was very pivotal. It changed the trajectory of my life. And these people didn't understand that, but they had that attitude of giving and seeing potential and wanting to encourage that potential. And I feel that everything that's happened in my life since then, to some extent, I owe them. I'm indebted to them. So first, as a recipient, I think what you're doing is terrific. Secondly, as you said, when you have a chance to, this is a simple way that you can impact somebody else's life in a way that could have that kind of trajectory that I've experienced. You never know. You could be touching somebody who this is going to help save their family life. You could be touching somebody that this is going to help their business get to the next level. You never know. You could be touching somebody that this is going to change Ireland or the world. We have no idea, but we get to those places not because we can see what's happening when we do it, but because we have that forward-looking mindset where we want to invest and give to other people. So first of all, I appreciate you making it available. You've essentially given us all a bag of seeds to go plant. And I want to encourage everybody who's on the webinar, go plant your seeds, go find somebody. And don't worry about whether it's perfect. Make sure that you take advantage of the opportunity that Padraig's giving us and find somebody to invest in and tell them that you're investing them because you believe in their future.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. That's great. I love the concept of seeds. I mean, I really like that. And again, I don't know what our listeners, what their experience has been, but I got a phone call from a guy once who I hadn't talked to for 15 years or 20 years. You know the story, Ron. And he rang me from South Africa, and I couldn't believe he was on the phone. We chatted away, and I said, "Why are you calling me?" He said, "I called to say thanks." I said, "Well, you're welcome. What are you thanking me for?" And he said, I've just been made vice president of this big hotel group globally, the biggest hotel group in the world. And I wanted to thank you. And I said, I'm doubly chuffed here. Thank you very much for thanking me. But why are you thanking me? He said, you won't remember this, but way back when, my first job, they told me a story. And it was a very, very modest contribution I'd made. But he considered that as being the launching pad for him. And I got huge, and it's why it was a nice conversation we over the phone. I got huge satisfaction out of that, not in any ego way, just the idea. So to take your point, we don't know the impact we have on people. So I really, really would like to encourage everybody. We gave you the gift of leadership. It has real value. It has the potential to kickstart somebody. We've extended the deadline to June the 2nd. Please get out there, give it to people, and help them launch themselves and get going. Okay.
Yes.
Back to the webinar proper. Question. Before we start, I want to ask all our listeners, I would like them to, if they would populate the chat box for me. And I'm going to open up the chat box here so I can see what you're saying. Loads of people here. Okay. Where are you now? So where's everybody now? it's 2 weeks later. You've had an opportunity to assimilate things. You'd have an opportunity to practice, to think, to reflect. And the question I want to ask everybody here, maybe just take 15, 20 seconds here, guys, and give us a bit of feedback, inspire us all, and tell us what are you thinking now, 2 weeks later? What's changed for you in your thinking around leadership? And what, if anything, have you done that's different, or are you planning to do, or have you done anything at all? I want to share a little quote with you before, as you're thinking about your popping a little into the chat box there, putting some comments with me. It's a little thing I scribble on the top of my diary, and I reflect on this every week. It's just, if I'm not for me, who is for me? If I'm only for me, what am I? And if not now, when? And I just really encourage you to think about this. If you're going to talk about your leadership development, you've got to do it. If you're not for you, nobody's for you. You have to do it. Nobody else is going to do it for you. The second thing is you're doing it not just for yourself. But think about it, if I'm only for me, what am I? You're doing it for all the people around you, the people you impact. So you won't be just improving yourself and influencing yourself. You're improving your relationships, be it personal, be it professional. It makes no difference. You're improving the whole world around you. And thirdly, if not now, when? If you're serious about developing your leadership, and clearly you are, because you're on this webinar, you're at the seminar. If you're serious about it, when are you planning to start? So I would just like to maybe just drop in some comments there for me, because we really would like to get your feedback, and I want to be able to talk about them as we go through. Ronan, working on the good to great motivation levels. Okay, I like that, Ronan. Thank you very much. So I want some comments, guys, here. What are you doing in the area of leadership? What's changed for you? What have you learned since we started? Just by the way, just quickly, the first cohort, we're putting the first cohort together to launch in June. It's almost full, thankfully. And we're also doing at least one, maybe two in-house programs. So if anybody wants to talk to us any more about it, the best thing to do really is just contact me, and we can sit down and give you a briefing and decide what you want to do. So I'm just going back here for a second to our slide deck. So bear with me. Or where are you now? And I want to just get into the webinar proper. As you know from the seminar, there are 25 competencies. And if you look at the first 7 of those competencies, they relate to what we're going to be talking about today. We said, we asked ourselves the question, what's a complete leader? And we said there are 4 qualities that we've grouped these 25 competencies into. And we say that leaders are clear thinkers, leaders lead themselves, leaders lead others, and leaders are authentic. So you remember that from the conference. In the clear thinkers, we said that there are a number of competencies, 7 of them there. And today we're planning to talk about 3 of them: futuristic thinking, problem solving, and decision making. So maybe we just talk a little bit about futuristic thinking. This is a really, really important competency for a CEO in the area of clarity and focus, clear thinking. And interesting, a lot of things like problem solving, decision making, other things you see in clarity and clear thinking are inextricably linked in to futuristic thinking. If you can't see the future, if you can't think about the future, it's very hard to make decisions, say what's the way forward. I'm just looking here at a couple of comments coming in. I've been emphasizing the 70-30 balance between consolidating strengths and working on developing areas in my conversation with managers, and it's really useful. Yeah. Great. Any comments to make on that, Ron?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that, because that's one of the fundamental ways that we have to shift our thinking about the future. My number one job as a leader of others is to identify what they're good at and make sure that we figure out how to use that to move our organization's goals forward. So that whole idea of getting that locked into your mind so that it becomes the way you instinctively think is a great thing to be working on. Ina, thank you a lot for that.
Okay, give me some story. Tell me something around futuristic thinking.
So first,
yes, rather than just telling me a definition of it, give me a sense of futuristic thinking.
Yeah, well, first of all, Padraig, I might mention that one of the things that fascinates me about futuristic thinking is that in our testing around the globe, this is the one skill that has the lowest score out of all 25. On a scale of 0 to 100, half of the people that we have looked at in our analysis of this skill have a score of less than 28 on a scale of 0 to 100. So people don't feel that confident about their ability to think about the future and to think into the future. And of course, none of us can see the future with the same kind of clarity that we see the past, because the past has happened and we can measure it. And of course, we all see it through our filters. The future hasn't happened, so we have to use more imagination. But we're not limited only to our imagination. We can also take advantage of a number of different resources to help us in the way that we think about the future. It's important to me because I think your ability to look out, whether it's 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, and to reflect on it and to think about where you want to go is going to have a big impact on what you spend your time on. It's going to have a big impact on how you plan your day and how you prioritize things, which things you say yes to and which things you say no to, in large part, are going to be driven by what you think the future is going to look like. And one of my favorite quotes, I love what you said you had on your computer this morning, but one of my favorite quotes is by an American journalist named Napoleon Hill, who said that whatever you can vividly imagine, ardently desire, sincerely believe, and enthusiastically act upon must inevitably come to pass. And what I love about that statement, and I'll repeat it again, what I love about that statement is the first three sections of it are about futuristic thinking. Whatever you can vividly imagine. So how much can you imagine what the future could be? And how much detail can you add to that? How much can you feel your way or think your way into that possibility? So vividly imagine. Secondly, ardently desire. How much motivation, how much inner drive can you generate? Can you coalesce around, or can you organize around this vision that you have for the future? Sincerely believe that it's possible, believe that you could go there, even if you don't know all the steps to take, you don't know all the obstacles you're going to have to overcome, but you still believe that it's possible to create something that doesn't yet exist. And for me, part of sincerely believe is it also has to pass my ethics questions. I have to believe that it's in alignment with character, that it's in alignment with integrity. So that's part of sincerely believe for me. Those first three are all about looking into the future, and then we get to the present, and enthusiastically act upon must inevitably come to pass. So just one more time, whatever you can vividly imagine, ardently desire, sincerely believe, and enthusiastically act upon must inevitably come to pass. Now, Padraig, I don't know if that statement's true, but I've been trying to prove it false for over 20 years, and so far I'm failing miserably to prove it false.
Yeah, me too. It's interesting, actually. One of the things that we do with our clients on a regular basis, we do a thing called one thing planning. And you and I have talked a bit about Gary Keller and the One Thing, a great book. And the fundamental concept behind one thing planning is actually strategic thinking. And the essence of strategic thinking is the ability to look into the future, envisage a future, and then identify very, very clearly what are the things actually, put it down through a process of values and so on, to what are the things actually that you need to do to make it happen. And in that exercise, and do that exercise, you have to ask the question all the time, exactly what you're saying, all the time, why am I doing this? And this question of why am I doing this is really about the motivation, isn't it? It's really about sincerely believe it and ardently want. You have to say, why do I want this really? Do I really believe this is important? So I think I love that quote. I'm going to get that quote off you if that's okay after the
Yes,
the
go ahead.
I'm going to make it. All my clients are going to hear about it from now on.
Yeah, great. Well, I borrowed it from Napoleon Hill, so you can borrow it from me.
Okay, so futuristic thinking. Let's just look at it. I've got a few notes here that I want to go through, and I'm going to pop up a slide in a second. So bear with me. Just pop this up for just 1 sec, and it's just I just want to run through this so people can see it. we know what they are. We know the ones in the book that we say are things that you can do to actually improve your futuristic thinking. Listen to others, read books about futuristic thinking, study trends, construct models, write future fiction, play chess, make or similar type of think ahead games, make a list of changes. We've a couple of other things down there, and maybe you might just give us your top behaviours on them. What's your one thing we've talked about? Maybe you might just make a quick comment on that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to endorse also the book, The One Thing. I think it's a terrific book, and I was really happy when I visited Dublin and saw that you've incorporated that as an integral part of the work that you do with leaders, because what it really helps us to do is to keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah,
and so that's the beginning part. But if, again, just to come back and think about what are we talking about when we say futuristic thinking, it's the ability to imagine or envision or predict what hasn't yet been realized and to move in that direction. And over time, as you practice that, and then as you follow up with actions, you begin to recognize that you can be a creator. You can create things that are not yet. And this is one of the big responsibilities for leaders. For me, some of the ways that I've done this and that I continue to do this is that I will write paragraphs about what I see as the future. One of the common ways of doing that is to pretend that you're at your 90th birthday party and people are getting up and talking about you. That's doing futuristic thinking around what kind of a person you want to become. I don't think many people at your 90th birthday party are going to get up and talk about achieving a sales goal, although that's a part of life. They're going to be talking about things that have more to do with character and the way that you've impacted them. But for me, I also use that same kind of imagineering forward around our business vision, where it is that we want to go as an organization. And it gets me to think with more detail about what the future looks like. Another thing that stimulates my thinking about the future, because I tend to be a person who has a tendency to think about what's on the list today or this week, because I have a pretty busy schedule, but I know I need to devote time to looking into the future. So one of the stimulants for that for me is reading about trends of what's happening in the future. So for instance, a lot of the things that we're all hearing about right now, autonomous driving or pilotless cars, or we're reading about the great advances in DNA and the way that we could end up extending life dramatically, or we're reading about digitization of business and how that's changing the world. And a great example of that is the way that our retail establishments are going through this terrific disruption right now because of companies like Amazon and people like that. These are things that you might not like, but they're a reality of what's happening in the future. And one of the things, Padraig, that you and I talked about, that is where I go in my futuristic thinking because of the work we do, is the ability to be present in a meeting through a hologram, even though you're not physically there. So the technology is already there. It's not quite scalable yet. It's still quite expensive, but the technology already exists where we could all be in a room today and we would be sitting around a table and you would literally believe that we were all there, and yet we're all somewhere else just being present through a hologram. So think about the implications of that for the kind of work that we do. Think about the potential implications of that in the context of whatever your business is or whatever you want your business to be. We talk about globalization as one of the major trends, and the whole idea behind globalization is that today your competitors can come from anywhere, any corner of the world, but also you can reach out and touch any corner of the world. Imagine what globalization will look like when we have holograms available for everybody so that you are present no matter where you want to be around the world. That's futuristic thinking. And to spend a little bit of time thinking about the implications of that is going to have an impact on the way that you're doing your business today.
But it's interesting, you know, I'm just going to It's interesting, Rod. I do a lot of business with clients who are remote from me. And as recent as yesterday, you know, I had a meeting with people in 3 different locations, and we were all online. And just like this, we're all online, we're all talking, and we're actually doing it. We were actually workshopping something for about 2.5, 3 hours. It was actually a workshop sharing the screen. And that's quite remarkable. And every time I see somebody driving to work, I just think the madness of it. Okay,
Well,
just
and just one other comment about that, Padraig, because when you and I started our careers, we didn't even have email. We thought the fax machine, well, actually, when I started my career, we didn't have a regular printer. We had the 2-ply printer with onion paper and things. But then when I started working a lot internationally, there was no email. We had to do everything by fax. And today, we have children and grandchildren spread across the United States and sometimes overseas. And with Skype, we feel a lot closer to them. And those of us that have experienced Skype or FaceTime or something like that, we can see how the future has come to us. And what I'm telling you is that the future of communication is going to advance much more in the future than it has up to this point. So all of the changes we've seen that have impacted us and made us feel closer are nothing compared to what's going to happen in the future. And this is just one of many trends that we can look at that have a real impact on the way we think about ourselves as leaders and the way we think about the organizations that we lead.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at apps, for example, with the smartphone and the various applications that have been written for them. It's quite remarkable to see the way you can communicate with people. I have a daughter at the moment walking 3,711 kilometres around Ireland, every waymarked trail in Ireland. She's a photographer. And I'm seeing all these updates all the time, the photographs, the videos, the text, the blogs, through different media apps that I have on my phone. It's really quite remarkable. So there is a real sense of connection. But the question is, how do we use that in our business? We need to be thinking that way. I'm just looking here at comments. Barry, 70-30 rule, working on my strengths is what I learned most after the seminar. Comment on that, Ron. The 70-20-10. Barry's saying that's what he got out of the seminar. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, great. Terrific. Well, again, I think it's a good point that so often one of the big problems with leadership development is not connecting what you're learning in the classroom to actually change behavior at the workplace. And this is where the 70-20-10 formula is very helpful. We talk about real situations, we role play them, we problem solve them, and then send people back into the workplace after one of our conversations in the Complete Leader program. They work, they develop a strategy, they practice it, they go, they implement it, and then come back and tell us what worked and what didn't work. And all of this creates a significant acceleration of learning because it's practical. It's not just theoretical. They're putting it into practice in real time. So good for you, Barry, that's something that you're focused on.
Okay. The second area that we want to look at, we looked at futuristic thinking. So we're talking about clarity. We're talking about leaders are clear thinkers. And we're looking at one of the competencies here called problem solving. What would you like? Tell me a story about problem solving.
Well, goodness gracious, there's so many different examples of this, but I guess probably the best story I could tell you is that I've concluded that almost all problems that involve people are what we describe as being divergent problems, or in the book, we refer to them as wicked messes. We don't mean that people are wicked, but we mean that they're wicked messes because they're extremely complex. So I have a number of stories I can think of where I've ended up in conflict with people. Heck, the reality is I don't end up in conflict that often, but because I'm 63 years old, almost 64, you get some chances along that road to end up in conflict. And if you have a commitment to wanting to resolve conflict in a people problem, you always recognize that it's what I refer to as a tangled mess. It's not just one issue that you fix. It's usually a combination of several different things going on. And you have to have the patience to undo one of those at a time to really resolve a people problem. A lot of times with people problems, we're content to just deal with it at a superficial level. We do whatever needs to be done extrinsically or whatever needs to be done in the moment so that we can get the other person to say, okay, it's fixed. But if we haven't really restored trust, if we haven't taken advantage of that problem to deepen trust and to deepen transparency, then what we've done is we untangled one knot and left all the knots there. So they're going to reappear later on. So this is one example I think of with what I call a wicked mess. Another example of it is in the work that we do around process improvement. So a lot of times we'll work with organizations to help them understand the systems and the processes that exist and where there's waste inherent in their systems So a very simple example of this in my career was when I was teaching this to one of my leadership teams in a company I was running. I decided I would just get all the people together that had anything to do with creating a paycheck. And we would map out what it took to create a paycheck. And so we just painstakingly created a process map, and we identified 38 actions that were required to generate a paycheck. And the people that did this were so amazed because nobody had ever looked at the whole system. They'd never tried to problem solve the whole system. So as we were going through it, they wanted to keep fixing it. I said, no, we can't fix it till we have it completely mapped out. So we finally had it all mapped out, 38 different steps. And within an hour, they had eliminated 20 of those steps by doing some problem solving. So they had taken away responsibilities. They'd reduced the amount of time. They dramatically reduced the cost of generating a paycheck. And we've done that with companies in a way. It's really another version of problem solving. We've done it in a way that ends up saving them tens of millions of dollars, because we don't think of it as being a simple problem. We think of it as a divergent problem that has a lot of pieces. And one of the clear things about problem solving that we do in that exercise is you have to first make sure that the problem has become transparent. And most of the time, what you think the problem is only a symptom. It's not the root.
You know, Ron, it's interesting. And when I listened to you talk about problem solving earlier, we were talking about futuristic thinking and so on. It's interesting to talk about these, and you realize the reductionist method, the Western scientific method, breaking things up into its components and then fixing each one and putting them back together and rebuilding, is a sort of an interesting model. And it doesn't matter whether you're envisioning the future and saying, how am I going to turn it into a reality, or if you're solving a problem right here now with an individual or a process. And there's a lot to be said for this notion of breaking things up into pieces, small little pieces. We've even done this here. What have we done with the leadership program? What's the complete leader program? Except, in fact, you've taken a leader and broken it up into 25 pieces and prioritized what can we do in each one. And it's interesting when I look at some of the comments here coming in from people. Barry says, as a futuristic leader, I must believe very much we embrace technology. But a lot of people have said down here this thing of actually working on things one at a time and not trying to fix everything one time. And the program, in fact, is a lot about fixing one thing or improving or building on one thing at a time. Just want to talk around that for a second.
Yeah, well, it's one thing at a time. But I'd like to take it another direction also, Padraig, and that is that one of the things we talk a lot about with leaders is, are you sure you're the person to fix the problem?
Yeah.
Because one of the aspects of leadership, one of the early aspects of leadership is being willing to take responsibility to get the problem fixed and not just blame somebody else and pass it off. But as you mature as a leader and you're developing other leaders, the temptation is that you start fixing other people's problems. And so it's, are you the right person to fix the problem? And one of the other questions that I often ask is this the right time to fix the problem? Because sometimes problems need to evolve before you can get to the root and get to the right answer. And if we have a high D score, for instance, if we're a high red, when we think about our behavioral style, there's a tendency for us to want to fix problems prematurely. And if we have a low D score or a low red, there's a tendency for us to wait too long. So it's, what is the problem? Is it divergent or convergent, or is it simple or linear, or is it complex? Who's the right person to fix this problem? Or maybe it's a group of people. And when is the right time? And then the fifth point about problem solving is, when will we know that it's solved? How will we know? Because sometimes we think that just because we have the solution up here and we go implement it, we don't take time to measure and make sure that, in fact, we fixed it. We might have created another problem. So those are the things I think about around problem solving.
And just one last comment on that. At the webinar, I talked a bit about being comfortable with ambiguity. And I think you made the point there earlier about knowing when to fix it, when to leave it alone. I think that being comfortable with ambiguity, not needing, and certainly for me is a high D, I need to fix everything like yesterday. So getting comfortable with not having to fix something, leaving something at the appropriate time, allowing it to evolve. I think not all problems need to be addressed immediately. I think you made that point. It's just a really important point. I just want to sort of emphasize it.
Yeah.
The time to fix them and the time to leave them alone and allow them to mature, for want of a better way of describing it, until in fact they're ripe and ready to be resolved.
Yes. And we have the advantage, Padraig, because of all of the tools that we have from TTI Success Insights, that when we ask the question, who's the right person to fix this problem, it's not just about where they are in the organization. It's about what we understand about their talent. It's about what we understand about the way that they've developed their capabilities or their skills. So we have a significant advantage over other leaders because of these tools. If we're using them, if we're pulling them out and making them a part of our everyday thinking, they have a tremendous impact on us as leaders.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what I find incredible, I had a meeting with a client actually yesterday, a coaching session I have with a particular client every month, short for 1 hour, and he actually comes into the office, and we were just talking about his organization, what he's doing. He's trying to really significantly grow it, trying to double it. And it was really interesting. He doesn't, despite all my pleadings, he doesn't use psychometrics. Eventually, yesterday, I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to actually profile all your existing team, and we're going to stick them up there on the wall. And he said, why? I said, so you know who they are. I said, because right now I hear you talking about so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. You don't actually know who they are. You can't describe in a way that we can do anything about them. So you can't describe characteristic traits or behaviors or driving force or acumen, capacity or competence. You actually can't describe them. You say, well, he does this, he's like this, and he does that. But that's not real. So I think this thing of problem solving, of breaking things down, when it comes to people, having the tools and using the tools to effectively really understand somebody in a way you can actually do something about it. And that the other person can understand themselves and say, oh, here's what the issue is. I can name it, I can name my game, I can box it, I can do something about it. That's really, really important.
Yeah. So one last comment before we go on. And this plays back to some of what we talked about in the workshop. Because we are wired, because we've been programmed to think about fixing ourselves or fixing others, actually problem solving is one of the highest scores when we compare leaders around the globe. Leaders think they're pretty good at problem solving. And I think the reason is because there's such a bias around fixing things. So even though this is of interest and we can always get better at it, it's actually one of the skills that leaders generally do pretty well at.
Do pretty well. Okay, let's talk about, we're talking about leaders are clear thinkers. And we're talking about the competencies, core competencies involved in that. And one that we want to talk about is decision making. Okay, we've talked about futuristic thinking. We've talked about problem solving. Let's talk about decision making. How, in fact, so again, tell me a story. How, in fact, do leaders make decisions? How do they develop this decision making skill?
Yes, so decision making could be part of what we do in problem solving, and decision making is also related to buying. When we decide to buy something, we're making a decision. And the thing I'm convinced about is that 100% of human beings make decisions emotionally. But we have different ways to getting to that place where we feel that we know it's time and we know what the right decision is in a particular situation. Based on what our talent patterns are and what our past experience is, sometimes we say, well, my gut tells me what the right decision is. That's not usually somebody who is more concerned about quality and who's really concerned about getting all their T's crossed and their I's dotted. That's somebody who tends to be ready, fire, 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 aim. So their approach to decision making is emotional, but it's a sense of urgency of emotion. At the other end of the spectrum, the person who's really analytical and they want to see all the facts and they want to consider different alternatives before they make a decision and they want to reflect deeply on it. The reality is they're still making the decision emotionally, but they get that emotional feeling of confidence after they've processed all of this data in order to make the decision. So decision making, if it's really based on emotion, understanding the way that our emotions come into play is an important part of getting better at decision making. And there are two aspects of the relationship between emotion and logic. The first aspect we refer to as emotional intelligence. And I know I sound a little bit like somebody who keeps repeating, but we work on this in the Complete Leader program. And when we talk about emotional self-control in the Complete Leader program, we're talking about triggers. Things that when something happens, all of a sudden it causes a change actually in your body chemistry. The amygdala in the back of your brain actually releases hormone. Your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up, you feel flushed, there's an energizing, it's oftentimes described as a fight or flight type of a response. And that's where emotion gets in front of logic. And what we know from neuroscience today is that every time we make decisions based on emotion first and logic second, the decisions are going to be compromised. We're only lucky if we end up making the right decision. Even if we made the right decision, we probably didn't make it the right way. So that's what I would call the aggressive, the active part of emotion in the decision-making process. But there's another part that we refer to as bias. And bias is emotional conditioning. It's where, as a result of several experiences, we develop an assumption that becomes the basis on which we make decisions. So let me give you an example of this that everybody can understand. If you had a dog growing up, and that dog was your protector, and that dog was your playmate, and you have wonderful memories of that dog, you develop, neuroscience tells us that you develop neural pathways that communicate to you subconsciously that dogs are wonderful, warm, friendly, forgiving animals. And so you tend to trust all dogs until they prove differently. On the other hand, if you had a dog growing up or maybe you didn't have a dog and there was a dog next door and that dog bit you and that dog was constantly barking at you, and you interpreted that barking as that dog being angry, although maybe the dog wasn't, but it's the way that you experienced that dog, you can develop a bias where all dogs are suspect, all dogs are dangerous, and I don't like being around dogs. And that gets locked into your subconscious mind, and it never goes away. It's with you your whole life. Now, you can learn how to desensitize it, but you can't get rid of it. That's emotional conditioning. And I use the dog example, but as a leader, we develop these emotional biases around how we relate to people, or how we think about the practical things that need to be done from day to day, how we look at our task list, or maybe how we think about authority structures, or how we think about even having a strategy. You know, Padraig, a lot of leaders that you and I talk with will tell us that, well, I don't really see the reason to have a strategy because I'm just reacting to my customers all the time. These are all emotional conditioning biases that have an impact on our decision-making. And if all decision-making is ultimately done at an emotional level, by learning about these and understanding what our biases are and understanding our triggers, the two ways that emotion plays with us, we can have a big impact on improving our decision-making. And for me, this has had a huge impact on the way that I process data, the way I think about things, and the way I think about the timing of making a decision as well. You know, a lot of the things I said about problem solving also are relevant here now. Are you the right person to make the decision? Yeah. Is this the right time to make the decision? What's the exact decision that needs to be made? So these are all questions that are an important part of how we process so that we use both logic and emotion to make better decisions.
Yeah, two things that it's interesting to hear you talking there on. Two things come to mind for me. The first thing that comes to mind is, of course, when you embark on leadership development, indeed on any development, the question you have to ask is, do you actually want to change at all? And I find it interesting, as we've been launching the program here in Ireland and talking to people, spoken to people, I've met people who don't. They talk about it, but in fact, they don't want to change. They want the world to change. And the second is, having made the decision that you actually do want to change, recognize it's not difficult. That conversation about all decisions being emotional, they are all emotional, we know this. And then how you step in front of that emotion and how you manage that and regulate and make appropriate decisions and so on and so forth. Those are techniques that are learned. So again, this is going to lead me directly into people have been asking about the program. Oh, I just got a comment here from Ronan. Wow, he says amen. He says, Willow says amen to the dog thing.
Yes.
I say amen to it as well, actually. But yeah, it leads me directly into the program. And maybe just spend a couple of minutes, just before we finish up, spend a couple of minutes talking about the program. And what is different about the program? And I think that the point, the 70-20-10 to me is the real differentiator in this program. If we want to actually change if we actually want to change our behavior, if we wanted things to become different, we actually have to practice something different. And we're all familiar with the, well, maybe we're not, with the be, do, have model. You know, if I want, and you said to me beautifully one day, I was talking about developing my empathetic skills, and you said, well, if you want to be an empathetic leader, you have to do the things that empathetic leaders do And ultimately, you will have an empathetic outlook. And we use a model called see, do, get. It is closed loop see, do, get model. We talk about it quite a bit. And you see the world a certain way, you have certain worldview, certain bias, certain prejudice or whatever. And then you act those out. So you explain things a certain way, just have you act a certain way. And typically you get a result which reinforces that worldview. And you're in this closed loop. And one of the great things about these practical approach that we adopt in the Complete Leader program, in my opinion, I want your comments on this, okay, is that you're actually breaking that loop. You're actually doing something different. And we say, if you look at that see, do, get loop, and say, where can you change? Well, at the obvious place, you can learn something new. So you learn something new, you see things differently, perhaps you'll act differently. The second is you act differently and get a different result. And the third is reflect. You notice what happens, you notice the outcome, you notice that is different. That changes the way you see the world. So I'm a great believer actually in action for adults. Adult learning, I think, is all about action. I like this thing over here, doing something different. And that's the foundation of the program, isn't it? You do something different, and then you get a different result, which changes the way you see things and the way you go.
Yeah, you just triggered an old memory for me. My grandfather, who was a big influence in my life, he was a very inspirational person, and he loved to tell me stories. He published a book years ago that I have in my library. There aren't many copies out there, but the book was called Thoughts Bursting into Words. And I love that phrase, bursting, thoughts bursting. So we could say thoughts bursting into action. It all begins with thought. So thinking about it is valuable. It's important. And reflecting is a big part of the Complete Leader program. Who am I? Who do I want to be? What's my purpose? Why am I here in the world? And how can the organization I work at help me fulfill what I'm here for in the world? These are important questions because they help us to be more intentional in the actions that we're going to start taking. So I think the journey of the Complete Leader is also the journey of an intentional leader where you're making choices. And one of the greatest ways that we build self-confidence is when we make a choice to do something, we do it, we look back and reflect and say, I did it. If we do this over and over and over again, this is see, do, get, see, do, get. See, it's exactly what you're talking about. So this is an important part of the program, but there are a lot of aspects to the program. I think of this as being and the program's simple, but the way we designed it, I think of as a complex recipe because we have a lot of different ingredients that we've brought together to bake this program, so to speak. So the first step is we want to have really practical stuff, practical skills, instruments that help people understand themselves in very clear, practical ways, things that are not overly nebulous or too theoretical, that they lead to taking action. So the first thing is around the content. The second thing is around the relationships that people build with each other in the program. I can tell you that people who go through the program at the end of the 12 or 14 months, I think in your case, it's a 12-month program, there is something about those relationships with the people that they've gone through it with that is unique, that they won't be able to replicate anywhere else because they have, in a sense, grown together, lived together. I think of in California, they have these mighty redwood trees, which are some of the tallest trees in the world. You know what's interesting about them? They don't have deep root systems. The only way those trees can be stable is that the roots intermingle with the other trees, and it's the combination of all their roots that creates the stability for this majesty. And in a way, that's what we see happening with these cohorts. It's not just that you're sinking your own roots deeper, but you're interconnecting your roots with each other in a way that gives you a level of confidence and experience that is going to change who you are as a person. So the relationships are very important. And then the third part is the relevance to what you're doing in your work today. So we spend a lot of time talking about what is superior performance in what you're doing as a leader today, and how can we help you create that, and how can we use the tools, the resources in the program to help you get there. So there's so many different facets to the program, but those are the big ideas, I think, that make the program unique.
Okay, last comment. We're going to wrap it up, guys. But 2 minutes left. And in the 2 minutes, Ron, I just like to ask you if I was, by the way, guys, just before I ask one question, if anybody's got any questions, any particular raise, now's the time. Type them in there in the chat box and I'll address them. Here's my question for Ron. We have all questions. I'm using you for the other webinar, some special offers and encourage you to do. So the last you come up with a call to action. If you want to give one last message to people listening to this webinar, what would it be?
So, Patrick, unfortunately, all of a sudden, my sound went crazy. So I couldn't hear your question. So instead, I'm going to answer the question I want to answer. And that is, I just want to say, so what? So what? What should we do? What's the next step? You know, I'm in this, obviously this is a business, but it's much more than a business for me. I'm in this because we really believe in helping people develop more clarity about their life, about their purpose, about what's unique about them, all the things we've talked about. And then the next step from there is we want to help people learn how to collaborate in a way that's magical. We want to help people learn how to collaborate in a way that really does create synergy, not just as a buzzword, but where they can look back and say, I never could have done that by myself. It was a result of the people around me, the people in my organization, that I've done something because it's we, not just me. And as a result of that, we're dedicated to helping people really change their worlds. So it's growing yourself to your fullest potential. It's changing your organization, but it's changing society too. I really believe that what we're doing has the ability to make a dent in the universe, so to speak, as Steve Jobs would have said. So my action to people would be, come on, help us, be a part of this. We want to build this community of people that are like-minded, that are striving to be the best version of themselves and helping others to do the same. And I just want to encourage you to be a part of the things that we're doing and take advantage of the resources and contribute your own ideas as well, so that together we can create this new world that's better for everybody.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ron. That's really great. And I'm going to propose to people a first practical step to changing the world is they can take that gift voucher that we gave to everybody and find somebody who will benefit from it and give it to them. So that's it, sort of wrapped up. I'd like to thank you, Ron, very much for the seminar, for the webinar for it, and for this webinar. Really appreciate you being available to us. We really value your input. Great book, great program, and we look forward to the launch of it here in Ireland. I just thank you so much, Ron and Porrick. I'm adopting the redwood analogy from Ina. I like that. Thanks a lot, Ina. I think it's a great analogy. One comment on the redwood before we go: people don't realise this, but those roots are actually connected. They actually share resources, and when one tree is suffering, in fact, food from the other trees flows to us. That's a fact.
Yeah.
And so that tree, if it's suffering, if it's having a bit of a drought or whatever. If
trees can do it, we should be able to do it.
That for sure. Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Barry. Thanks, Ronan, Maura, Ina, everyone. Really appreciate you being online. Cheers. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.